Hello everyone, my name is Steve Wyss, and in the second half of this episode I'll be joined as ever by my colleague Jonathan Fadugba. But to kick us off straight away, we have an exclusive interview with Sarpsborg player Amin Askar, who I caught up with this week. In the second half of the episode, we're going to be talking about some Swedish matters, the really close title race there in the Allsvenskan, along with a few listener questions. But without further ado, I'm going to go straight into this interview, which hopefully you'll all enjoy. And joining me as a guest on this edition of the Nordic Football Podcast is Sarpsborg utility player Amin Askar. Amin, welcome to the show. Thanks very much for coming on. How are you doing today?
I'm very good, thank you.
Well, it's great to have you on board here. And first of all, I'm going to have to start off with a congratulations to you, actually, because according to transfermarkt.com, your most recent appearance for Sarpsborg against Ranheim was your 400th competitive career appearance. So,
wow. Thank you, I didn't know.
So, well done. You've joined the 400 club and, maybe you'll be able to make it 500 and more by the end of your career. And a good way to mark the appearance with a very important 2-0 win. I mean, that is a massive victory for Sarpsborg, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm honored to be in that club. I will definitely try to get 500 also. No, this victory was we wait long. We haven't won one single game away from home this year, and obviously it was a massive win for us. Some victories means more than just 3 points. It's the emotion around the game, before the game, during halftime, of course after the game. Now we're going for a two weeks break for the national team games, and it's a perfect atmosphere around the club when you win the last game before
definitely
a 2-week break, especially when we are bottom of the league there.
Yeah, I mean we'll talk a little bit more about this season later, but just briefly, what do you think has been the problem for Sarpsborg this year? Have you just been a bit unlucky with some draws that should have been wins? Or is there something else that's been a problem? Because most people expected you to be a little bit higher in the table, at least.
Yeah, of course. We had many good seasons now, and especially after Europe last year. And we had high hopes for our team this season. Everybody expected much from us. Pre-season looked good. Of course, sometimes you win these big games in pre-season, but it doesn't mean anything. But anyways, everything looks good before the season starts. We start home to Molde. We should have won, but we ended up drawing, of course, at home. And we picked up a lot of injuries. Myself was injured a lot in the first part of the season, and especially at home, we haven't won. We drew so many games we easily used to win before, and then we just came in a bad circle, and we kind of never get out of that circle. Either we draw or we lose, or we're up 1-0, 2-0, we give it away, and it's just been like the story of our season. It's unlucky sometimes, but in the end, it's after so many games, the luck. You can't speak about the luck part anymore. Then it's more about like skills and not coincidence.
Yes, it can be difficult when you get into those sort of cycles. So, let's talk about Amin Askar, the player then. And for the listeners who don't know too much about you, currently playing for Sarpsborg in the Norwegian Eliteserien. Started his career at a club called Moss in 2003 as an 18-year-old, and then moved to Fredrikstad, and has also had spells at Brann, Sarpsborg on loan, and then also a spell in Turkey. So it all started for you at Moss in 2003 as an 18-year-old. You moved to Norway when you were 2 years old, according to Wikipedia. So what was it like for you growing up in Norway? Did you come through the Moss youth system there?
No, like most foreign kids, you grow up in a suburb place in your city. I grew up in Moss. We had these tall blocks, a lot of foreign kids playing football all day in, day out. and I played for my childhood club, is Cambo. I played that until I was 16, and I actually only played 1 year in the youth in Moss. Moss used to be in Elite Serien. So when I came to Moss was 2002. I was 16. The club was in Elite Serien, but they went down. Next year I was 17, and I joined the first team, and that's where I started my career. But so I didn't really go through the system. I was just in the system for 1 year.
So you spent 5 seasons at Moss in the what was known then as the Adeco Ligaen, which is now the Obos Ligaen, and 5 seasons there. What positions did you mostly play when you were at Moss?
And when I came to Moss, I was a central midfielder. But when you came to the first team, it's like, you see a young boy, he's fast. They put me on the wing, and I used to play most from the right side, sometimes on the left, and sometimes right back also. But most of the games I was right winger. You have
an incredible versatility in terms of positions. I have to say, I've been keeping player records in leagues that I analyse for over 10, 15 years now. And, I list down primary positions, secondary positions, tertiary positions. I list you down as pretty much, you can play nearly every outfield position, which is incredible, really. I mean, has that always been the case, or is it something that you've developed as the years have gone by?
Oh, it's kind of always been there. Like when you're a kid, you always put the best players in the midfield. I used to play midfield then, and sometimes I can play like central defender when I was 14, 15, because my team was not that good. We had like 6, 7 good players, but not 11 when we were winning. I remember the coach used to put me like a central defender. And for my grown-up career, like my senior career, I've been playing everything in the central, wide, right back, and the last couple of games now, you've probably seen me playing as a number 9, like a fake 9 maybe.
Yeah, up front, yeah.
It's everywhere. I'm used to this. This has just been the way I like to play football. It doesn't matter. I feel I understand my roles anyways, and I play a lot of futsal, and I just feel just the way I was brought up, and maybe for my physical skills, as long as I don't play centre back, every other position doesn't matter so much.
Yeah. So 5 years at Moss in the second tier in Norway, and then you moved to Fredrikstad, who a rival of Moss, I do believe, and that is when you tasted the Eliteserien for the first time. Fredrikstad actually paid £100,000 for your services in 2009. Did you feel after 5 years in the second division you were definitely ready for the top flight football in Norway?
No, but those 5 years was long 5 years, because I remember after my third season, that was the first time I really wanted to move, and Fredrikstad already then tried to buy me. Moss was saying no a couple of years, and like a couple of transfer windows in the summer, and then after the summer, and then the next summer. So I was a little bit frustrated the last 2 seasons, I remember, in Moss, because I felt I was ready for the first league. I was playing national team.
Yeah.
Many of my teammates there was playing first team. I was first league, and I was feeling I was good enough for that. And the clubs want to bring me a couple of clubs, but most they put me on I signed a long contract there after my first year, and kind of got stuck there. So when I came to Fredrikstad, I was over ready, if you can say that in English.
Do you think that you're actually a good example of sort of learning your trade in a lower league for a few years, and then you're fully ready for the top league? Do you think even today that teams in the Eliteserien should maybe take more of a chance on guys in the Obos Ligaen rather than sign some random foreign players?
Yes or no. All depends on, of course, of the age. When I came to Eliteserien, since I was 17, I almost played every game for Moss. So most players at my age, 17, 18, plays for second team when they're in their first league. Then you play like in third division or fourth division or something like that. So my experience I had a lot of experience when I came to Eliteserien. But it's all about scouting and economic. You can see some clubs, especially after the finance crisis, started to put more money on youth, or they didn't have money, so they have to gamble on the youth. And that went well. You start buying average foreign players. So I think as long as you don't buy, you're not buying average foreign players, it's better. Then it's okay. But if you're just going for average, it's better. I prefer you bring from your second team or your youth players, or from second division.
Yeah, give them more of a chance. And so you had a few years at Fredrikstad, which certainly looked quite interesting, involved in some relegation playoff matches, even some Europa League qualifiers there at Fredrikstad. And then in 2012, that's when, according to Transfermarkt anyway, that was your highest market value. You were worth over £1 million back in 2012, Amin. Then you moved to Brann on a free transfer, and your first 2 years there, certainly statistically, would appear to be perhaps some of the best of your footballing career in terms of goals and assists. You played regularly on the right-hand side of midfield, right wing at Brann. Were they good times for you at that club?
Yeah, I had a nice time. Actually, they bought me for €1.5 million. My contract was not finished yet in Fredrikstad.
All right. Yes.
So they bought me before my last year of my contract. I went to Brann, and it was nice. We played. It was a little bit different. It's the first time I played so offensive role. We played like 4-2-3-1, very freely wingers. I remember we had Bentley or Huseklepp on the other wing. We used to switch during the game. I didn't have so much defensive obligation at that time, I remember. So I very enjoyed that year. I remember I scored 8 or 9 goals. I got the best goal of the season. And it was fun time, nice players to play with. And I actually I got top scorer on the year after, I remember, 2013.
Do you think that sort of having a more settled position for a couple of seasons helped you out there, that you were regularly on that right hand side?
No doubt. When you play regular position, then you play it every day on training. Your head is only focused on one of the wingers, and just the way we played in that team. We used to concede a lot, but we used to score a lot. So it was like kind of perfect team to play for, like stat wise. I remember how I was feeling. And when you play the same position every game, week in, week out in training, everything just feels natural. You don't have to play right back from Monday to Friday, and all of a sudden Sunday you play left back or midfield or so. Of course it's easier.
Yeah, it was actually your third season in Brann, where under the management of Rikard Norling, who actually won the title in Allsvenskan last season for AIK, where you were kind of messed around a bit in terms of positions. You were literally everywhere on the field. That was, of course, Brann's shock relegation season from the Tippeligaen back then, and that resulted in their relegation. But you then moved on loan to Sarpsborg, I do believe, after that, and then you had a spell in Turkish football for a team who I'm not even going to try and pronounce them. It looks really hard to pronounce them. And Turkish football, what's it like over there?
Oh, it was, of course I was skeptical, I went on loan to Sarpsborg when Brann went down. We had a bad time with Rikard Norling. He tried his 4-4-2. Thing was not going well. We kind of spoke with him a couple of times, but I think I was maybe a little bit stubborn, but still he's a good coach. He's a good guy. But thing didn't work out. We went down. I went on loan, and then when I went to Turkey, I was a little bit skeptical because in my head I was going back to Brann. That was my main object. I spoke with Lars-Arne Nilsen. He said we had a good conversation. Remember, after our cup final with Sarpsborg, he told me about the plans he had for Brann and how I would fit in that project, and everything was feeling good. And then this Turkey offer came. I wanted to try something new, but if I would try something new, I have to be something that is very interesting for me, because I know Brann. I love Brann and the city, so everything was good. And then Tugay Kerimoglu, the old player for Blackburn and Glasgow Rangers.
Yes.
He was that coach at that time. So when we spoke, we had a good conversation. Obviously, I knew him from international football and Blackburn and this stuff. And I think he called me 4th or 5th time, and he said, "Hey, we're gonna bring a lot of new players in January. You're my first transfer. I'm not gonna stop calling." And after some conversation, I said, "Okay, let's try it." And it was a very interesting spell. I signed for 1.5 years. I stayed there 1.5 years, but I could write like 3 books about that period.
Wow.
We had six different head coaches, couple of caretakers in between them, three presidents. It was chaos. It was fun, but it was chaos.
Absolutely mental. I remember two guy. He's got to be one of the hardest guys I've ever seen play in the Premier League. He was just tough as nails, wasn't he? Yeah. Incredible midfield.
He used to join our training. His passing skills. It looks like Paul Scholes. It was amazing. His level was so much more than the best player.
So you ended up going back to Sarpsborg, and you rejoined one of your old managers, Geir Bakke, who I do believe was in charge for 2 or 3 years when you were at Moss. So Geir Bakke, then I presume you must have a really good relationship with him.
I had a very good relationship with him when I left Moss. He already left Moss before me to Stabæk. So the year I went from Moss to Fredrikstad, Stabæk also came with an offer, and I was supposed to go there. But I think what they told me was Stabæk. I think Stabæk gave 1 million Norwegian for me to sign and to Moss. But Fredrikstad obviously gave the same, but they gave another 500,000 Norwegian after a couple of games, and then this price was better, so they sold me there. So me and Geir had a good relationship since Moss, and of course, if he wasn't in Sarpsborg, I would never go there the first time or the second time.
So what is it like playing under Geir Bakke? How his coaching methods, his tactics, often a 4-4-2 at Sarpsborg. Obviously, it must be a system you enjoy. I mean, he's actually achieved some great things at Sarpsborg. With often limited resources. What would you say his biggest strengths are as a manager and coach?
For me, it's like he's a people person. He understands players and people. He relates good. Sometimes you have a good coach is good on tactic, or just coaches are just good with people. He has both, especially the part with people. He can read the group very nicely. He knows which players that's good for his philosophy. Obviously, we are 4-4-2 team, and the club's identity is Atletico Madrid. So every time we try to make a transfer, it's very easy. They kind of paint the picture for us. This is what we want, and they want players that train good, and he's very honest on his feedbacks. Obviously, people know that we bring a lot of players because we sell a lot of players, and sometimes the chemistry is okay between the players, but not between the players and our philosophy, because in this 4-4-2 you have to run a lot. It's aggressive. It's very clear identity. So with Geir Bakke, you never have to second guess his opinion or what it means about anything in football. I play a long time now. I had many coaches. Some coaches is like you can have a meeting with a coach, you go out of the meeting with more questions than when you went in. They kind of speak but doesn't have anything.
But Geir Bakke, this is probably the first season he's come under any sort of I wouldn't say pressure, but maybe some questions. How do you think he's been handling this season when results haven't been so good? Has it been a different sort of challenge for him in terms of motivation and lifting spirits?
Of course it's different, but because of his track record also, I think, in 2015 we came to cup final. 2016 was like 5th or 6th place, and then the 2017 he had the 3rd place in a new cup final, and obviously we had the European Europa League last year. So you have a lot of history with the club. You've done a lot of good stuff. So
plenty of credit in the bank and a lot of respect.
Yeah.
A lot of respect.
So you know that you have done a lot of good things for like 4 or 5 years, and then of course obviously you have different role in the club, and he looks very confident. He knows what he wants. He had success for many years, so he hasn't lost that confidence, and that's what I think is the problem with many other clubs. You have some coaches who just came, don't have the same and they freeze. They have mental freeze. They lose their motivation. You can see them. They start to lose weight and all that stuff. So, but you don't see this around here.
So you mentioned that Europa League incredible run you had there. I mean, for you personally, I'm guessing that's got to be one of your career highlights, to qualify against all the odds and then compete very strongly in the actual Europa League group, where you even had a chance of qualifying. So talk us through that run in last year. It must have been absolutely brilliant for everyone involved at the club.
Of course, it was. It was just a journey that started. You know, we went to Iceland. We play against Vestmannaeyjar. It's an island outside Iceland. A place Icelandic people don't like to go. So you know, but we were lucky with the weather when we went there, and we won there. We won home. We went to Swiss. We played from Gallen. We won. We go to Rijeka. It was a little bit hostile there, but it was okay. It's a nice place to play, and we won. And the most nerves was for the last game. We went to Israel to play Tel Aviv, Maccabi Tel Aviv, and I remember it was so hot there. You couldn't breathe. Your mouth was dry after 5 minutes. You go take some drink on the sidelines. After the first drink, the kids, they picked the balls. They threw away our drink. So it was struggling a couple of minutes there. Us on the left side there, and we got a penalty in the end of the game. We won. We went to Europa League, and it was just an amazing journey. All the way until the second last game, when we were winning 2-0 home against Besiktas halftime. Genk was winning 2-0 against Malmö at halftime. So that was the 5th game in the group, and at that moment we were through. So it was small details from getting in the league and then do like Østfold to go through, because obviously they inspired us all. Østfold, I never even heard about the club. They made it.
Yeah.
They made us believe it, and we almost made it. So it's at that moment you didn't enjoy it so much, but when I've been thinking back, the journey we had with our team, it's just incredible. And I think for a team like us, they put us through 4 matches, like 8 matches against 4 different teams. So you're not supposed to make it.
I mean, it was an incredible journey.
Supposed to make it.
It was an incredible journey, and it was fantastic to watch a team like Sarpsborg go so deep into the competition unexpectedly, and great for the fans as well. And sticking with the theme of the fans, I'm going to have to talk to you about the footballing rivalry in your principality of Østfold. I mean, it's quite incredible. The 3 teams there, Sarpsborg, Fredrikstad and Moss, and you've played for all 3 of them. And there's quite I know Fredrikstad and Moss are well below where they want to be right now, but there's quite a strong footballing rivalry between all 3 teams, isn't there? Especially Fredrikstad and Sarpsborg. So what can you tell us about that rivalry, Amin?
No, it's fun. I remember my first year. I'm 17. I'm starting the game against Fredrikstad. We play in Moss. It's the same stadium that Moss has today, and you're not allowed to put. You're not allowed to have more than like 2,000 people inside. But before, you didn't have these rules. So we played Fredrikstad. It was more than 10,000 people in there. I think if something would caught fire, people would die. It was so crowded. It was amazing. You go straight from high school playing that matches. I went play that match at night. We won. It was amazing. But at that time, Moss was the best team, and like things go in cycles, you know. And then Fredrikstad came up. Fredrikstad was the best team. I went there, and then I used to love playing Sarpsborg. Fredrikstad, Sarpsborg. Wow, this is the game you look for. When the schedule comes, you don't care about going to Brandstadion or Lerkendal. You look for Sarpsborg when they came up, and obviously both cities are on fire. Both cities, they don't call other city for the name. They just say the other city.
Wow. Yeah.
So people speak a lot about Lillestrøm and Vålerenga and this stuff, but these 2 cities really hate each other, and the rivalry is from history. So it's amazing matches, and I hope for the future people will see them again.
Yeah. Have the Sarpsborg fans don't mind that your history with Fredrikstad?
It was strange in the beginning when I came on loan in 2015. There, I was I changed my mind after I said yes to Sarpsborg to go to another club, and then just because of that, I was thinking, because of I've been playing 3 years in Fredrikstad. I love it there, and they were happy with me. I was happy with them, and they could sell me and follow me, and I was following them. And then should I go to Sarpsborg and mess a lot of history between the club and the fans? So in the end, I got cold feet. I said to Sarpsborg, not going. But then I had a long conversation with Geir, and assistant coach from Freddy. I had him in Fredrikstad, and after a long conversation, I said, "Okay, I will come and sign for you guys." So to be honest, it was very hard.
Yeah, but ultimately you've got to think of your own career as well, haven't you? And that's an important part of it.
And the clubs were. I never been in the clubs when they're in the same league. You know, I didn't change.
Yeah.
When I went to Fredrikstad, they were in the first league. Most was not. When I was in Sarpsborg, Fredrikstad was not in the first league.
Do you think that Fredrikstad can come back one day to the elite Serien? They're big enough.
Definitely, yeah. They have the supporters. I was watching Moss Sarpsborg earlier this year. It was 10,000 there when Fredrikstad playing Moss, and this is like this third league. And
that's mad.
If Terje Høili, you know, the rich man, if he has a good day, he puts some money in, and the fans are there. They are every year when the season begins. There are 7,000-8,000 more crowded than most of the leagues in the elite Serien. So I think everybody in Norway misses that club.
Yeah,
and
I think
definitely they will come up.
Yeah, I think one day as well. Now, looking back throughout your whole career, this is probably a little bit of a difficult question. Who is the best or some of the best players you've actually ever played with?
I enjoyed playing with Krepin. He was a young boy, Krepin Diatta.
Oh, yes, I remember him.
Amazing talent, because he was only 18. He came earlier. When I came in the summer, was about that time he started to play. So he was amazing talent. Yeah. And when I was in Turkey, we had a good number 10. You remember Lua?
Lua, yes.
Lumano.
Oh, really? You played with him there, did you?
Yeah, I enjoyed playing with him. This is the guy, like Ødegaard, like you make a run, he will find you. You have a solution for everything. It was just amazing to watch him play, even though it's not his best years of his career. But I don't know, he had something special. It was very fun to just see him in training and his touches on the ball, and I will say those two if I have to pick two players.
Okay, good choices. Now, just briefly, I just want to mention your international career or lack of it. I mean, you were born in Ethiopia. You were set to play for them in, I think, 2014, but there were some technical or rule issues. How come that's never managed to happen?
Well, I think they called me for the first time of like 2012 or 2011. They asked me. I was like, I'm not sure. And then I went to Brann. I remember my coaches was speaking a little bit with the Norwegian Federation. I was doing very good in Brann, scoring a lot of goals. But obviously, you have a lot of Norwegian players who play abroad, so it's normal. Those go to national team. But anyways, so I was thinking, I don't think this is nothing for me. And then 2014, in the end, I said, okay, let me try. I went down for 2 weeks there. We're gonna play Algeria and one other team, but it was some problem with my papers because I've been playing for youth teams in Norway, so they have to do some paperwork issues with FIFA, and obviously Ethiopia is Africa. Not even the most easiest things never goes correctly, you know. I couldn't play. I came there for the next international break again for 2 weeks. I couldn't play, and now I say, after this, I just say, don't call me again, because as long as you don't give me now papers from FIFA that I can play, I'm not gonna play. And they change people all the time there. And
yeah, it's crazy.
You never know what happens there. It's a little bit like when I was in Turkey. No structure, no nothing, and they've been calling me almost every year. Even not this squad, but the last squad now. Before this international summer, they put me in the squad without even asking me. Oh, they said, I said, okay, maybe we can speak, but I need these papers, and then I will make up my mind again.
Yeah, it sounds a crazy situation.
I'm just used to this professional. I'm very in my career. I like everything to be strict and good, you know. So it turned me off, like from the first minute.
Yeah, I guess you look back maybe a little bit sad that you never got to play international football. Or would it have been just an absolute mess there?
I'm not the guy that looks behind, you know. It would be fun. I played some friendly games with them. I enjoyed it. It was fun and this and that. But like, I know my head. I like structure, And this African time, people always late for meeting, and it was this small stuff that was irritating when I was there. So it will be fun, but it's nothing that I feel like I missed out on something.
Yeah. Like you say, you're someone that likes to look ahead. So let's look ahead to the rest of this season. And you've sadly been injured for quite a lot of 2019, but you're back fit now. You've played the last 2 matches for Sarpsborg as a striker, actually, or in a certainly attacking position. Do you play Eliteserien Fantasy, Amin, at all?
Yeah. I love that game.
You're
Fantasy Premier League and both.
You're listed as a defender. You're 5.2 million. Is now the time for fantasy managers in Norway to get you in the team?
I had myself in Vålerenga home. We had a clean sheet. Not Stabæk home now. I actually put myself as a captain. Not that. Yeah, I was playing striker against Stabæk. I had myself as captain. But I had a clean sheet. I had myself now in Ranheim, so I got clean sheet. And I saw 3 of the last 4 games I have clean sheet, so I've been taking some points. So I had myself for those games.
Do you think you'll be playing in attack for the rest of the season, or could you be literally anywhere on the field?
At least for the nearby time, I would guess I will be striker. But you never know in football. We have 3 strikers on the bench now that are good players. I play with Moose against Stabæk now. I play with Lafferty, but still you have Jørgen Strand, you have Skålevik, and Moose last time on the bench. So you never know.
Yeah, so I guess to some people might be surprised to see you in the team playing in that position when you've got Moose on the bench. But maybe, do you think Geir Bakke really trusts you? He knows you well. You're an experienced player. Is that sort of thing really important when you're in this relegation battle?
Yeah, of course. Moose is also experienced. He helped Allsvenskan good say in the relegation. So I know we got a good player there that have been in these situations before, but the way we play also is a little bit about our identity, like the way we press, the way we play. Obviously, when we play with Carl Lafferty, he's not the running guy, but he's like the tall, big, like now Quinn, He's big man fighting, and at least that's what they told me is now Quinn. And I think they see us as a good partnership, one big guy, one that runs a lot and is fast. And they told me after the last game that I break the record on this GPS for running these kilometers and more than the Champions League of Milner last year. And so they like this also. It's part of our game is to be aggressive, especially when you play 4-4-2. The players up front need to. The player on the first line have to put pressure on defense, and like you saw last year, our success was a lot with Patrick and Rashad Mohammed in front. We had a fast one and a big one. The year before, we had the same with Patrick Mortensen and Krepindiata. So I think they like this combination, and for these games I've been playing with striker, it's been working good for the team. So yeah, I guess it's been a good thing. So.
Yeah, and it sounds like there's a lot more confidence now at the club that you certainly can keep yourself, stay up in the Eliteserien and then kick on next year maybe. So finally, Amin, what about the future for you after you've played football? Do you see yourself going into management or coaching or TV or something like that?
I like both. I love football. Since I was a kid, I've been playing all FIFAs. I used to play Championship Manager. I'm always see myself as a manager when I was a kid also. Even you play with your friends, you want to be the captain, you want to be this guy who speaks a lot to organize. Even still now, even if I play on the wing, I still talk a lot and organize a lot. And football's been my life, and I like every part of the football. So I definitely see myself in this. I wouldn't call it business because it's my passion, Yeah. If I didn't get paid for this, I would still play and then work somewhere else, at night or in the morning or whatever. So, yeah.
You'd definitely be staying in the game then.
Yeah, for sure. You will see me in football until I die.
So, yes. All we can say now is very best of luck to you and the whole Sarpsborg team. for the rest of the season. I have to say, it'd be, from my personal point of view, it'd be nice to see you stay up, because I think you're the sort of squad that can really kick on next year and maybe challenge up there again. But thanks
no doubt about it. If the league would start today, I think a lot of things will be different. But anyways, we will fight like crazy in the end. We have 6 or 7 cup matches left now, so.
Well, thanks very much. Thanks very much for your time and joining us on the Nordic Football Podcast, Armin. And we very much enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Join us after the break, where we talk about Allsvenskan matters in Sweden, along with a few listener questions. So we'll catch you again very soon.
Welcome back to part 2 of the Nordic Football Podcast. My name is Jonathan Fadugba. Really good interview, Steve. I enjoyed that. Obviously, a journey from Ethiopia to Norway, a career in the Norwegian leagues, and it was a fascinating insight, to be honest. How was the interview for yourself on a personal level? Did you enjoy it?
Absolutely loved it with Armin, and again, thanks very much for him for joining the Nordic Football Podcast, and we hope that the listeners find it very interesting indeed. But we must move on to some Swedish matters now. And the title race in Norway has slipped in Molde's favour, but in Sweden, well, you could technically still say there's a 4-way battle, and a massive result in the previous round for Hammarby, who are they coming up late to make a challenge. They beat Djurgården in the derby away from home. Well, technically they were the away team, weren't they, in this fixture? But it seemed like the derby curse continued for Djurgården. As a result, Malmö, they've taken advantage. They're top of the league on goal difference. They just have to win their last 3 games now. But just take us back 2 weeks ago for that match in Stockholm, and a huge result for Hammarby.
Indeed, and you might have heard there, Rodic. It was a fantastic game. I'm just reviewing it, in fact, now. This evening, because reminding ourselves of what was, to be honest, a very, very good Stockholm derby. We talked about it, didn't we, Steve, in the past recent podcast, the last podcast about Djurgården and their potential ability to win the title. But we did highlight a key thing in this title race could be their inability to beat the teams around them from Stockholm. We mentioned the fact that the 3 games they'd lost this season were all to Stockholm teams, twice to AIK and once to Hammarby. And we highlighted this game as a key match. Could they overcome that derby ghost and set themselves up for a potential title win with 3 games remaining? Unfortunately, Steve, they made it 0 out of 4 in Stockholm derbies, lost again at home to Hammarby. Nikola Jurjic with a great goal to begin with, and then that was followed up by Kačaničlić. It was an error from Elliot Shesh. We praised him so much on the last podcast, but unfortunately had a bit of a rick, giving the ball away, and Kačaničlić was there to profit. And Djurgården, they really looked quite wobbly. That they weren't at it, especially in the first half. Found themselves 2-0 down. Early in the second half, 55th minute. Buya Toure managed to pull 1 goal back, but it was not enough. A fantastic game. Hammarby have managed to see off Djurgården. We now have a serious title race, Steve. We have Malmö, 59 points, top of the table, who later in the day beat IFK Göteborg 1-0 in a key game. Managed to see them off. Then we have Djurgården as well, level on points, but goal difference is a bit inferior. And AIK 56. So that's 4 teams there within 3 points of each other. 4 teams, 3 points, 3 games left. Who's going to win the title?
Yes, it could even be a case that goal difference becomes a crucial factor here. Malmö obviously have an advantage in that regard, plus 35 goal difference for them, plus 30 for Djurgården, and plus 31 for Hammarby. Hammarby obviously with the significant amount of goals scored, so that's worth a little bit extra. The big game coming up this weekend is Hammarby against Malmö. Both teams will see it as a must-win, really, won't they? Because I think Hammarby are not going to be able to come back and win the title if they don't get 3 points here. But Malmo, destiny's back in their own hands again. I mean, how do you see it going? It's a crucial affair. We've almost got a battle of the best offense in the league against the best defense. Who edges it?
Yeah, I think it's it's essentially going to probably decide the title race if we look at the remaining games. There aren't too many games left in terms of teams meeting each other. So this is a chance for both of them to stand them up, or will they slit each other's throats? A draw here could kill them both really with 2 games to go. Djurgården could go then 3 points clear, and obviously that would put them. If Hammarby don't win essentially, and Djurgården do win, they're looking at being the 6 points ahead of them, or 5 points ahead of them. So Hammarby really probably, if they're going to win the title, I think they've given themselves an outside chance at the title. Really, let's be honest. They weren't expected to be in the top 3 at this stage. They'd been playing amazing football, really good offensive game. One of the most exciting teams to watch in the league without doubt this season. But in terms of the title race, they were always a little bit below it. But they've leaped above AIK now. Can they win the title? I don't know. I mean, there's still been talks about the Djurgården games. The Hammarby manager Stefan Billborn has had to brush off some more questions about that match. It was considered such a big game. And in terms of derbies, of course, it was really, really well contested. Both sets of fans. It was a very, very good game, I thought, in terms of the fans and the spectacle, with a lot of incidents during the match. But Malmo, the team, I've said it recently, they're just creeping into it now. And I think they're looking very strong. And they're not maybe as exciting as Hammarby, but they are getting the job done week after week. They're grinding out results. So I think they will be one to be feared. And I mean, if I had to predict a winner, I'd potentially lean towards Malmo in that game.
It is worth saying, though, that Hammarby have the best home record in the league. They've won 11 out of 13 matches and drawn the other 2. No one has yet been able to beat them in front of their own fans. So that is a pretty tough ask for Malmo, isn't it? In terms of the tactical matchup, is it the case of Hammarby have just got to watch themselves defensively? Because surely they've got enough goals in them to score here? Or is their defence going to let them down at the 11th hour?
Well, I think the game will be decided. Hammarby have scored 67 goals this season. That's nearly 20 more than Malmo. Incredible goal-scoring record, really. Well clear of any other team in the league by miles. But the problem that's let them down, as you said there, is the defence. 36 conceded. You've got to go further. There's even teams that are way down the table who haven't conceded that many, like EFK, the 7th. So it's a lot of goals conceded. There's a lot of goals in general. Maybe people are looking to have a bet on this game. We might be looking at the overs market, but Malmo don't concede many. 14 conceded, as you said, best defensive record in the league. Uwe Rosler is a bit of a conservative manager in the way he sets his team up at times. He will look to I imagine if he's going to approach this game looking to maybe grind out a win. I don't think he's going to go all guns blazing. I think he'd be pretty happy with even a draw, maybe looking to eke a 1-0. So that's the way I'd look at it. But Hammarby, they only know one way, really, and I think that'll be attacking. So definitely a good spectacle at hand. There's a couple of injuries going into the game, but all in all, the teams are kind of sharp for the international break. So it's going to be a big one, Steve.
At the same time this match kicks off, there's also Falkenberg against AIK. At the moment, they're kind of the not forgotten team in this title race, but because they do have that significantly less goal difference, you could say AIK are the outsiders in this title race. But, would you expect them to easily win that match away at Falkenberg? You've got opposition who are fighting for their lives down at the bottom of the table. They should have enough for them, shouldn't they?
Yeah, I think if they can't beat Falkenberg, they don't deserve to win the title, in my opinion. Falkenberg have been pretty desperate this season, and I think in the last podcast I completely forgot them in my predictions. I neglected to mention them, but they've been pretty poor. I worry for them in terms of staying up. I know I predicted them to get out of it, but to be honest, I think I kind of overlooked how poor they've been at times. Their most recent game was a 5-0 defeat. A 4-0 defeat at Elfsborg. Absolutely battered them. And they've only got one win in their last sort of 8 or 9, which was against Östersund. So yeah, it's a big game. for AIK to just overcome and not slip up. Their issue is that they've got quite a lot of injuries, actually. AIK, sorry. Oscar Linner, Rasmus Lindqvist, Per Carlson, Nabil Buhui, and Robert Lundstrom could all miss the game. They've all been missing training this week. So, there is a bit of a, an injury crisis there as well. Enoch Kofi-Adu as well has had a few injury problems this week. So they are a little bit depleted going into it, but I don't think they could ask for much of a better game really than Falkenberg, who are pretty poor in general, don't have the best of. I mean, they get most of their points at home, in fairness to them, that they've got this season. But when you look at their record against the bigger teams, you wouldn't expect them to offer too many troubles. Djurgården beat them away 3-0. Malmö beat them away 2-1. Hammarby beat them away 2-0. Häcken beat them away 3-0. So you'd expect AIK to get the job done.
And then the day later, it's IFK Göteborg against Djurgården. So, I mean, at this point in time, Djurgården are odds-on favourites to win that game with the bookmakers. That just smells a bit wrong to me. I don't know why. They've just suffered that really bad loss in the derby. Could they be shot mentally a little bit? I don't know. The pressure's going to be on them, whatever, because whatever happens in the other match, there's pressure on them to deliver a result. Is that a banana skin fixture, or are IFK sort of just languishing in mid-table and maybe won't give it everything?
No, I think it's spot on there, Steve. I think it is a potential banana skin fixture. Obviously, as we mentioned, Djurgården have done very well against anyone who's not from Stockholm this season, and they beat EFK 2-1 early in April. But I think that Hammarby game could shock them. I think they were lucky that maybe there was an international break. I guess you can argue both ways. Or on the one hand, you could say they've got more time to think about it. On the other hand, you can say they've got more time to recover maybe and get over it. But I think it's a pretty big blow at this stage of the season. Obviously, they have an inferior goal difference to Malmö, so they need Malmö to drop points somewhere, or they need to smash a few teams. And don't forget, they've still got Norrköping away last game. So two tough fixtures, and I think they've got a really tough game on their hands. The only thing I'd say about EFK is that they haven't really got much to play for. I think they're the kind of team that has they can lose their concentration at times. I think they're a decent team. They've had an interesting season, maybe not a brilliant season, but an interesting one. I think they lost a lot of players in the summer, which kind of killed them, in my opinion. But they're a team to be feared, I think, at times. But they do leave gaps. So you could see an upset. You could see a draw, for example, something like that. And at this stage of the season, you're going to need the points.
You certainly do. And we've got a question from one of our listeners, Joe Gold. Thank you very much for a bunch of questions from you this week, Joe. And I feel like I've asked you this one on the Nordic Football Podcast numerous times this year, John. Who's going to win the Allsvenskan?
Yeah, I get it. You ask me this every week, and I change my mind every week, probably. I said at the beginning of the season, and I was completely wrong. I said Norrköping, they're 9 points off it, so it's not mathematically impossible, but very unlikely. I switched a little bit as the season's gone on towards Malmö. I think just in terms of their metrics, their expected goals, and their general performances, I think I lean towards Malmö. So I think if I had to predict it now, looking at the run-ins and the way the season's panned out at this moment in time, I think I would lean towards Malmö winning the title. But they've got Hammarby away, AIK at home next 2 games. So it's do or die. Just a final comment on the question about the title race. I think Hammarby Malmö this weekend could decide the title. I think I'd go that far. So I think it would potentially decide the title. It's that big a game. I think if Malmö drop points, then I think it allows the likes of Djurgården to come back into it, or maybe even Hammarby if they win. I think if Malmö win that game, with 2 games left, I think they might just have enough to sort of grind it out those last 2 games.
It's really close and very interesting viewing for sure. As we go down to the bottom of the table now, just quickly here, 2 crunch fixtures at the bottom this weekend. AFC Eskilstuna against Sundsvall. That is 16th against 14th, and also Östersunds against Sirius. 2 massive games down the bottom. Who would you give the edge to in those matches?
I think Geir Sundsvall will beat AFC Eskilstuna. And the other game, Sirius against Östersund, draw. I've got a link in for a draw maybe. Sirius got a good result in their last game and have pretty much secured themselves, maybe just about secured themselves safety. They beat Helsingborg 2-1 at home, which is a big result in my opinion. They've hit that 25-point mark, which I said I think would just about guarantee safety this season. I think a draw would pretty much top it off. Kalmar, though, are in 12th. So they're on a little bit of red alert, to be honest. They're slipping.
Kalmar are always in 11th or 12th, aren't they? I watched Östersund's last game, actually. I don't know why I was watching it, but against Häcken away, they got a 1-1 draw, and I was quite impressed with what I saw in terms of their fighting spirit. They came back from 1-0 down, scored a good goal, and I'm not saying they could have won the game, but for a team that had lost 4 or 5 in a row, they showed plenty of heart and fight with their manager in the stands, of course. I was a bit more encouraged that they might be able to survive, but this is a huge game for them against Sirius. Obviously at home, they need a result. But I'm a little bit more optimistic personally about Östersund after watching them in that game at Häcken.
Yeah, and their financial problems off the field still go on. That's something that's obviously a distraction. But just going back to Kalmar, they've got Norrköping away this weekend. So, if they lose that game, they're not completely out of it. I mean, if GIF Sundsvall win away at AFC, they'll be level on points with Kalmar were they to lose. And they've got a better goal difference. So Kalmar really have to be looking over their shoulders. I mean, if GIF Sundsvall do win this weekend, then Eskilstuna are essentially down. So that would pretty much relegate them. Albeit maybe if Östersund's and GIF Sundsvall win, they're down pretty much. So AFC is on the brink.
Okay, well, let's talk about teams that are going to come up next season. And another question from Joe Gold here. Who looks like they're coming up this year from the second division in each country, Norway and Sweden? Well, the Superettan in Sweden at the moment, what can you tell us about it, John? Who looks like they are going to be making a rise to the top flight?
Yeah, it's a good question, Joe, and thanks a lot. And also, Joe, we've had a look at your logos, by the way. You submitted some great logos in the last few weeks, which we are reviewing, and we'll give it a little consideration there. Joe, we might even put them out to Twitter and see what they think. But yeah, looking at the Superettan, we've got Mjällby, who are top of the table, and Varberg Boys. So those are the two teams maybe who are looking to come up. It's been an interesting season in the Superettan. We've had teams kind of run away with it. Varberg at the start of the season looked like they were going to run away with the title. To be honest, they were way ahead, but they've been sucked back into it by Mjällby, who have not gone away. Also, Jönköping Södra, who were in the Allsvenskan not too long ago, they've put together a decent run and are now in third place and maybe looking to maybe try and snatch one of the two automatic promotion spots. Of course, the third place team here gets a promotion game, playoff game. So, they're well positioned for that. EK Braga as well, and Degerfors, the two others, maybe Ogrita, but you're looking at the top 5 there, probably the ones who would go up. Varberg Boys have some interesting players. We've had some discussions about some of their players this season. Keenan Ayer and Lama Favana, for example. They've got a player I like who's called Purpurin Bakaj, who I saw when I was out in Sweden. He was playing for Tvakas at that time in the third division, and I noted his name down at the time. And I've been following his career a little bit since. He's now one of the top assist providers in the Superettan, and I think he's a decent player from what I can remember. But yes, it's an interesting race. And then if you look at the bottom of the table, just quickly, a shout out to our old friend Sean Constable, who's currently working in a coaching role at Bromma Poikina in Stockholm, and they are second bottom at the moment, and they could be facing a double relegation, which would be a real disaster for the Academy of Sweden, as they call themselves. A very good academy team, but they have fallen on hard times this year. They're looking to push their way out of that and maybe secure an automatic relegation playoff game, which could give them a chance to survive. So there's a lot going on at the top and bottom of the league, really, and it's been, I think, a pretty exciting Superettan season, if I'm honest.
Do you know, every single year I look at this division and it just reeks to me of, weak. It just is. I mean, looking at the teams at the top of the league have lost 7 games, 27. 52 points at this point in time is a really low figure. And I said this last year about the teams coming up. I was really worried about how they're going to cope in the Allsvenskan. Obviously, Helsingborg are a little bit different because they're a bigger club, got bigger resources. But, I mean, it just seems there's a big gap for me between the Allsvenskan and the Superettans. Or certainly, all right, maybe the bottom 3 or 4 in the Allsvenskan are a similar level to Superettan. I don't know. But these teams that are going to come up, they're going to have to find a way of adding to their quality, aren't they? Otherwise, they're going to be another case of AFC Eskilstuna, Falkenberg. We've seen Dalkurd struggle last year. The same old story, won't it?
I think you're right there. I mean, whoever comes up, if it's, let's say Varberg or, Ike Braga or whoever, Mjällby, I think they will be struggling to stay in the division next season. As we've mentioned before, it's kind of a 2-tier league to a certain extent. And the same teams seem to get sucked into it. I mean, if you look at the teams who went down, though, you've got Dalkurd, who are kind of, nowhere to, they're having a decent season in terms of their league position, 7th, but they're not really involved in the title race. You've got Drona Poikina in the bottom 2 of the league, and you've got Trelleborg, who are kind of just drifting along in 10th. And then you've got bigger teams like Gais and Halmstad, who came down a few seasons ago, just 9th and 11th. It's really, the teams that go down tend to just get dragged back into it and don't seem to kind of, really solidify themselves. You've got big clubs there as well, like Örgryte. Örgryte are one of the most successful teams in Sweden. Let's remind ourselves in terms of titles won and that kind of thing. They're a very big club historically, but they've just been, pedaling along in the 2nd division for some years now. Gais are a big club as well in Gothenburg. I'd love to see the likes of Gais and Örgryte back in the Allsvenskan, to be honest. But they've fallen on hard times. I think you need to keep your squad together. You need an effective squad. Eskilstuna came back after going down, but it looks like they've not managed. They're a yo-yo club now, essentially. So, yes, it really does seem like there's maybe a little bit of a lack of quality or lack of nous. But that's also a financial issue, isn't it, Steve? At the end of the day, attendances aren't massive in the Superettan. Maybe you could argue the entertainment levels aren't great at times, and that lends itself to maybe just not being able to attract the best kind of players.
Yeah, absolutely. Very valid points there. And to answer Joe's question about the Norwegian 2nd tier, Ålesund, they're pretty much already wrapped up promotion. I think they just need one more official point to go up, but they're pretty much there on goal difference. They've won 21 out of 26 games, Ålesund, this year under Lars Bohinen. Only lost once. They've dominated the league, and they'll come up, and I expect they'll compete really strongly in the Eliteserien. And the 2nd spot's going to be between Sandefjord and Start. At the moment, Sandefjord hold a 1-point gap over them. 4 games left. Straight shootout there for the 2nd promotion spot. And the 3rd place team will be in the relegation playoff match against the Eliteserien club. So pretty straightforward there. And he also asked a question about what do you know about the player called up from Chile from Arlesons? Nicolas Castro is his name. I know very little about him. I do not follow the Oberliga, but I know he's got a good goal-scoring record up there. I don't know if he played or not, I'll be brutally honest. I don't follow South American football. But obviously it's very encouraging for him and Oberliga as a whole that someone gets called up to the Chilean national squad there. So, but yeah, fairly straightforward is the Oberliga compared to Superettan anyway.
Yeah, Nicolas Castro has got 15 goals in 20 games, by the way, this season. So, I guess it's quite a surprise to see him called up to national team level, but he's certainly doing quite well in the 2nd tier. And he's previously of Kongsvinger and Vålerenga as well in the past few seasons. So he's got a bit of a track record there. Steve, we also have a question from Neil Baxter, our good friend Neil Baxter, who wants to know about Viking. And he says, do Viking have the fixtures to push for a top 3 finish? And if so, are there any players that can maybe push them into the top 3, maybe with a bit of a fantasy football slant in mind? Thanks for your question, Neil, as always. Steve, any thoughts on Viking there?
Well, this is a good question, Neil. I've got one bit of concern about Viking, actually. They have got a massive Norwegian Cup semi-final to look forward to in a couple of weeks' time. And you would imagine their priority is on that competition. They're in a very solid Eliteserien safe spot. They maybe could finish as high as fifth or sixth, but they really have got to target that cup, which could lead to all sorts of squad rotation, which is a concern, isn't it? I know already, even without the cup, that the manager's been very happy to change the squad around a lot. In terms of fixtures on paper, they've got some easier ones. They've got Tromsø, they've got Lillestrøm, but their last two games are against Rosenborg and Brann. And just say they get to that cup final, I think their heads are going to be in the clouds, aren't they, a bit? So I wouldn't personally be looking at any Viking players. Just there's a lot of uncertainty all round.
Yeah, just a note there for those who might not follow it so closely. Viking are fifth at the moment, and they are 8 points behind third place, Odd. So you'd think, well, with 6 games to go, a bit of a stretch potentially. We're not going to touch on the Norwegian league this week because we've had that brilliant interview. We will be back to discuss Norway though in the coming weeks. There's still 6 games left there, whereas in Sweden there's just 3. So we will be having more in Norway in the coming weeks. So stay tuned, of course. Don't forget you could follow us on Twitter at Nordic Foot Pod, and you can always ask us questions, follow us, give us a like, and don't forget to share. And we really appreciate any reviews of the podcast if you follow it on iTunes or Spotify, wherever. Tell somebody about it that you know and give us a recommendation, because we're always looking to build. I mean, just also from an expected goals point of view, Steve, I just want to, before we move on in terms of Viking, they are actually the 3rd top goal scorers in the league, and they have the 3rd best expected goals in the league, according to Y-Scout, our partners Y-Scout's data. So, they top 3 wise, they are actually, they are a top 3 side goals and expected goals wise. But as we say, their points count more. So that's what we look at. I think we're going to wrap it up there, aren't we, Steve? We don't have too many more questions this week. We've been asked a few about the international break, but we'll touch on that another time as we're running a bit short on time. We had one question from Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz ate me. Used to be ate my son, but he's now eating Ted Cruz. He's eating himself. So he asks about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. But if anyone wants to know about Solskjaer and our opinions, please do tune into the last episode on the pod. We had a good sort of 5-10 minute discussion about Solskjaer's methods, what's going wrong at Manchester United and his time at Molde. Tactically, we did discuss him. So go back through our archives, subscribe, and listen to that again. So we have answered that question. But that's really about it, isn't it, Steve?
Yes, Ted asked, do you guys think Ole could end up in Trondheim in the near future? Well, Trondheim might be relegated. They might be on the lookout for a new manager. So maybe there.
Gosh.
Okay, yes, that wraps it up, John. Nice pleasure as always, and once again thanks to Amin Askar for a great interview, and we'll see you all again next time. Goodbye.
Bye everyone.